And I'll start by welcoming you to this media workshop. My name is Lucy Wanjiko. I'm the head of communication for World Animal Protection, taking care of Africa. And I'll be your facilitator for this engagement. In today's media training, we look at wildlife animal welfare and media reporting, and the impact that journalists like you can play in highlighting the plight of wildlife and using your voice as a champion for wildlife in Kenya and across Africa. As we say, Africa, we are Africans and Africa is our business. So we are looking at how we can form a movement of African journalists who care for wildlife, but with a specific focus on wildlife campaign as executed by World Animal Protection. The key area of focus for this training today will be highlighting the plight of Africa's wildlife and delving deep on how the media can change the audience mindset to cultivate a growing global movement of people who care and advocate for animals. We will also shine a spotlight on the opportunities available in facilitating journalists like you to tell wildlife stories, of course, wearing the lens of wild animal protection. The person leading us in this discussion today is Edith Kamen, who is all the way in Entebbe, and I'm glad she could join us today. Edith Kamen is our wildlife campaigns manager. She leads our wildlife work across Africa and across the globe, and she will tell us the main strands that we are looking at when we talk about wildlife campaign with specific focus on wild animal protection. Edith has years of experience in wildlife and sustainable movement of people who care and advocate for better wild animal protection, better wild animal welfare. Since she was a little girl, she was always adored nature and how it complements our existence. It has culminated to a 20 years career in international development and policy advocacy. And the love for wildlife and animals in general is exhibited when you visit Edith's home. There are all kinds of animals and plants all doing some proper coexistence at her home. So clearly she has this passion and drive for wildlife and for nature and how everything can coexist, including us humans, to ensure that animals have a better life. So she leads our wildlife work across the continent and she is our facilitator. But just before we kick off, it will be good to know where you are joining us from. So please type on the chat function. Yes, the chat function is active. So please do type where you're joining us from and also type your name. That is in case your profile name is different. So please type your name and where you are joining us from so that we can know which countries are represented here. So thank you. Please continue typing. I can see all of you are saying hi to all of us and we are ready. Now it's at 9:22. And now I'm going to invite Edith to take us through her presentation. Should you have any question as she presents, please note it down or type it in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We will have a session just after the presentation for Q&A. So just ensure that you type on your chat or in your notebook any question or suggestion that you might have. We'll be able to answer at the end of her presentation. Also ensure that we mute in terms of housekeeping. Please mute your mic as she does her presentation. You have an opportunity to also have a face-to-face or use your audio at the end. So I hope you enjoyed this session and I welcome you. Thanks for joining us. Over to you, Edith, for your training.
Thank you, Lucy. Hi, thank you, Lucy, for that kind introduction of me. And of course, I want to take this opportunity to welcome all of you, our friends, of course, those we've been with for the last many years. We've worked on animal welfare issues, but also I want to invite and welcome those that have just joined us for the first time. In Kiswahili, they say karibu. In Uganda, they say wewe alokuja, you are welcome in English, so please feel free. I will start by sharing my screen, and I hope everybody will be able to see it. Are you able to see my screen? Lucy, can you confirm, please, first?
Yes, Edith, we can see it.
And I hope it will be into slideshow. Wow. Yeah, it's going into, is it in slideshow now?
Yes, it's super now. It's on slideshow.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so indeed today we are talking about wildlife and the role that the media play protect wildlife in Africa, and how as World Animal Protection we can work with you to promote and protect our African wildlife. So in terms of this presentation, of course, I'll give you a overview of who we are, and then I will go down and highlight our strategy as an organization for the next 10 years. And then I will narrow down to the wildlife strategy, and then we'll go a little deeper into that. And then at some point, I will also ask you to really give your views on how we think we can together work together as media to protect wildlife. Because like, I really don't want this to be kind of a lecture, but rather an interactive session where we also hear from you, your ideas on how we can take wildlife in Africa to another level, and how we can influence mindsets and change the narrative for the betterment of our wildlife. So I'll begin with giving a snapshot of what our vision is as World Animal Protection. I know many of you might have seen this a couple of times, but I think it's not really good to take you for granted. There might be new people. So World Animal Protection's vision is a world where animals live free from cruelty and suffering. Therefore, we are there really to ensure that wild animals live a life that is worth living. And our mission, as Lucy said, is to move the world, build a movement for the protection of animals worldwide. In terms of where we are as an organization, where we work, we are, of course, a global organization with headquarters in the UK, but our presence spans a number of countries, and globally we are present in 14 countries across the globe, including in Asia, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the US, Canada, Asia, and then of course Africa. In Africa, we are represented in Kenya. That is where we have our regional office that takes care of wildlife across the African continent. We have been around for more than half a century, so we are indeed a very old organization, although we have transformed a couple of times to become what we are today. But still, much as we have transformed, our mission has not changed. It's about safeguarding animals' welfare. Again, for the sake of those that are joining us for the first time and for the purpose of reminding ourselves, at World Animal Protection, we believe animal welfare is affected by the relationship between, the way human beings interact with wildlife. And we believe it is our duty to ensure that all animals are treated humanely, they are treated responsibly, and of course, with respect. And this includes all considerations in all aspects of animal well-being, such as the 5 domains, or what we call the 5 animal freedoms. Globally, there is what is accepted as the 5 domains of animal welfare, or what constitutes animal welfare. Just like us, animals need nutrition, good nutrition. So just like our domestic animals, animals in the wild must have access to efficient food. They must have access to balanced diet. The diet must be varied. The food must be clean. They must have water. And really it must be accessed without any difficulty. That is one of the domains that constitute good animal welfare. The other domain is environment. Just like we have our domestic animals, we must ensure that the environment in which wild animals live is comfortable for them. They should be able to regulate their own temperatures when it's hot. They must be able to move to cool places if it's hot, and vice versa. And they must have space, they must have air, they must be able to move away from noise. And they also must be able to predict what is happening in their environment, because once animals are kept away from their natural environment, then they may not have the opportunity to experience all these factors. The third domain is concerns health. Animals must be free from poor health. That means that animals must have good health through the absence of things like disease, injury, death, and of course, impairment. And they must have a really good level of fitness in order for them to function normally. So just like human beings, just like domestic animals, wild animals require to have good health. The fourth domain, or the fourth freedom for animals, is animals must be able to exercise or experience all, they must be able to exhibit their natural behavior, whereby they should be able to engage within the environment, they should be able to explore the environment, they should be able to hunt, they should be able to mate, they should be able to associate with the species of their choice. They should be able to interact with the species of their kind, and they should be able to bond and play and even retreat in times of danger. So when we interrupt animals in their natural environment in a way, for instance, of extracting them, then in a way we destabilize and deny them the right to exhibit their natural behavior. The last domain is the mental state. Again, just like human beings, animals are sentient and they have the ability to experience pain, they have the ability to experience love, emotions, and all that. And they also have the ability to experience fear, frustration, hunger, and all sorts of negative factors, boredom, pain, and the rest. So animals, whether wild or domestic, must be able to be left so that they are in their best mental state, that as much as possible. So those are the 5 domains that constitute animal welfare, that are globally and internationally recognized by many organizations, including some of the UN agencies like OIE, which is an agency that is charged with animal health within the UN system. So moving from highlighting what animal welfare entails, now let's look at what World Animal Protection Strategy is for the next 10 years. We have just concluded, last year we just concluded our 5-year strategy. And moving forward as an organization, we've realized that the issues of animal welfare are so enormous that short-term planning might not give us the best way of dealing with these issues, because many of these issues are so systemic, so much deep-rooted, that short-term planning may not do much in terms of destabilizing and disrupting some of those systems that entrench the suffering of animals on this planet. So in our next 10-year strategy, we want to overturn the entrenched global systems that cause so much pain and suffering for animals. And of course, as an organization, in the past, we have worked in so many campaign areas, but for the next 10 years, we have made a decision that we will focus on 2 areas. That is animals in farming. Those are the animals that we use for food. Therefore, we have coined a goal whereby, as an organization, we want to ensure that farmed animals live a good life by transforming the global food system. So that is the work. Those of you who know our colleague Victor Yamo, that is the work that he leads. Myself, I lead the work on wildlife, and that constitutes our goal 2 for our next 10-year strategy. And for the next 10 years, under our wildlife work, we'll be working to stop wild animals from being cruelly exploited as commodities by changing the systems that are causing that. So those are our 2 strategic goals for our next 10 years. They look few, but the work under this is going to be enormous. I think I need to move this toolbar because it looks like it is obstructing my presentation. I think it's better that way. So given that the systems or the changes that we desire are so rooted into a number of systems in the way we run our wildlife sector, so in order to achieve this goal, we will need to shift policies and laws. We will need to shift our trade, our economic systems, how we make money as countries, how we make money as corporates, how we make money as individuals. But we'll also need to look again at our livelihood systems, because we know most of our livelihoods, especially in the third world and the developing world in Africa, which of course Africa is one of them, there's so much dependency on wildlife and wildlands. And as a result, we end up interfering with the natural habitats for wildlife. So we need to relook at our livelihood systems, but also we need to look at our belief systems. We need to look at our cultures, because some of our cultures are so exploitative in the way we look at animals, but also the beliefs that we hold as society and different cultures across the continent. And ultimately, we see mindset change as one of those things that will underpin really our work. So that once we shift mindsets, then people can begin to be compassionate and really look at wild animals as part of us, as part of our friends that share this planet with us. I'm sharing with you this very crowded sort of screen. But the content on this screen is really what constitutes a wildlife strategy as in a nutshell. So we have just moved from the goal, which is ending commodification of wildlife and shifting the systems that support it. And now we have kind of expounded it. And what you see on this slide is our 10-year strategy for wildlife work across the entire organization. So what is the problem that we are trying to address? Because in the introduction, Lucy highlighted that in this training, we will be looking at some of the challenges, some of the problems that are facing our wildlife on the African continent. And what are some of the factors that are causing those problems? And because the problems are so deep-rooted, we are taking a holistic approach, or what we call a systems approach, to addressing these problems. So what we have highlighted as the biggest problem that this strategy will be trying to achieve in the next 10 years is that wild animals are facing a growing threat of cruelty and abuse just for human use and profit, and all this is out of control. Animals are experiencing catastrophic decline in their habitats, of course, through human activity, but also this is also made worse by climate change. So in our previous strategy, climate change was one of those areas that we did not pay much attention to. But in this new strategy, climate change is also going to be one of those elements that we'll tackle in relation to animal welfare. And ultimately, our vision is that wildlife will have a right to a wild life with animals free from all forms of cruel exploitation, and they will be thriving within abundant natural habitat that is humanely protected or that is well protected for the benefit of all. When we talk of the benefit of all, we mean the animals, we mean the plants, we mean ourselves who occupy this planet with the rest of the creatures. That is what it means. And in terms of what is causing this problem, we have identified 4 key drivers that are causing this problem. The first driver is that people believe that they have a right to exploit wild animals. It is a belief that is so widespread, so much entrenched in our societies, so much entrenched in the older generations, so much entrenched in the new generations, and it's so much widespread. Because we justify why, we always find the reasons why we think we should exploit wild animals. We say, after all, God gave us the animals for us to use. We justify that. Then we say we are at the top of the food chain, so we have a right to exploit all the other creatures that are below us in the food chain. Also just and say God gave us the power to dominate and domineer over the rest of the creatures and subdue them. And we justify all that, and in a way, we go ahead to entrench those beliefs and justification into the policies that we make. Therefore, that takes us to the third, if I skip the second one, it takes us to the third root cause or driver of this problem. So policymakers become accomplices in all this, because when we believe that we have a right to exploit, and then policymakers go ahead and entrench this in the policies and regulations and laws, then of course it becomes normal. Commodification and exploitation becomes normal. So commodification has been accepted by policymakers, and it is seen as necessary for economic development, for social development, and all spheres of human needs. we see commodification as necessary. That is why we end up capturing wildlife, and we think we can rear them the way we rear other animals and trade in them as commodities. And because all this is supported by policy, the corporates or the business people see this as normal. So this now brings us to the third area, which is the business of exploitation. Because we believe wild animals are there for us to exploit and use, we only value animals only in relation to what value we can extract from them, without thinking about wild animals as sentient beings, as beings that have a right, an intrinsic value to exist in their own right as sentient beings. Then the fourth driver are the pressures on habitats. And we know because our population is ever increasing, our demands are ever increasing, we end up putting so much pressure on the habitats of these animals. And then this, of course, has also been exacerbated by climate change. But even that pressure also, in a way, also makes us more vulnerable and makes the animals more vulnerable to climate change. Therefore, we've seen increased disasters, we've seen, and also increased demand for cheap meat, which is threatening habitats for wild animals. So all these four drivers are what we have identified that underpin our strategy for the next 10 years, and our campaigns will be calling for those four root causes of animal suffering. In order to achieve a world where commodification of wildlife has ended, again, we have come up with four intervention areas. Of course, the first intervention area is we want to disrupt commercial exploitation of wildlife by driving down consumer demand and by exposing the industry's false narratives. What do we mean by this? You will find that, for instance, we have oil explorations going on in Africa and, of course, in other parts of the world. And we know most of these explorations are taking place, say, in protected areas or in places of high biodiversity, and they are displacing wildlife. But then these companies will turn around and say, we are creating jobs, we are going to raise the African countries to join the middle income countries in the next 10 years. There's going to be employment. So it's like the businesses have been coined to sound like they are so green and so beneficial without looking at the other side, whereby they are causing the suffering animals where these businesses are taking place. We have heard of the palm plantations to produce oil, and of course, oil is used in many other chains of production. And where are these palm plantations? They are displacing wildlife. They are encroaching on habitats. For instance, in my country, in Uganda, we used to have so many forests on Lake Victoria, on what is known as the Kalangala Islands. But as we speak now, many of them have been displaced by palm plantations. There was also an issue I remember in Kenya, where I think an avocado farm was blocking migratory routes for elephants and other wildlife. So the examples across Africa, many. In the Central African Republic, the Central Africa, we know, again, there's a lot of deforestation going on, and all in the name establishing plantations of different types, cocoa and others, that are displacing wildlife and are destroying their habitats. So we must drive down that consumer demand and expose industries false narrative that they are protecting wildlife. And then the second intervention area is what we call innovative solutions, because we cannot tell the corporates to move away from exploitative industries without demonstrating their viable routes out of exploitation. So we work with private sector as part of our campaign to really work out practical solutions, and we'll do it through strategic alliances and engage with local communities so that we build a case for sustainable alternatives and move people away from exploitative consumption. The last and third intervention area is, when we do all this, we realize that we need to enter into an era where we must have and create a new deal for wild animals, where we must mend our relationship with wild animals, where laws and policies must be shifted at different levels, at national level, at international level, and really challenge the whole notion around sustainable use of wildlife, so that at the end of the day, we really live in harmony with nature, we reestablish our relationship with nature, and we live in a world where we see ourselves as part of one planet with the rest of the creatures that occupy them. And this is where we are talking about the one welfare and the rights of nature concepts. These are concepts that are emerging, but they are being embraced by many people from different corners of the world. And I think it is high time that even people in the media should begin to think about, what does it mean when we talk about one welfare? What does it mean when we talk about rights of nature? So that ultimately we reestablish our relationship with nature and live in harmony with nature, so that nature does not bounce back and affect us the way we've been affected by COVID-19, which is the virus that is believed to have originated from wild animals, and it's now ravaging the globe. In doing this, as I said, mindset shift is going to be key, and this is what is going to underpin our work. We must make sure that in order to achieve all this, we must change people's mindsets, but also we need to mobilize people so that they are part of the movement that is going to push for this, because we can't do it alone. And certainly the media is one of those key allies that we have identified. They are one of those key stakeholders that we have identified that will work, that we believe can work with us, shift people's mindsets, and tell a different story. At the end of it all, in terms of the outcomes, we want a new narrative whereby wild animals have a right to wildlife, and that should be what should be known across the entire world as the dominant public narrative. Not a narrative where people see wildlife as objects to be exploited and abused, but a narrative where people believe wild animals, just like us, have a right to exist in their natural habitats. And then, of course, the other outcome is around ending commercial exploitation of wildlife, making it unavailable, and of course unacceptable. And then the other one is redirecting exploitative practices to humane and sustainable solutions. And then the last one is making sure that we have a new deal for wild animals, which is enshrined in the law and our policies, both at the national level as well as the global level. For our session today, the gist of the matter is around the narrative change. How can the media tell the story, change the narrative, shift mindsets, so that people can begin really to take action for animals? So I'll be moving to the next slide, which kind of summarizes what I've been talking about. Maybe I will not go through this one, but this one simply summarizes all these things I've been talking about. We want to shift people's belief that they have a right to exploit. We want to shift their mindsets. We want to destabilize and redirect the business community to move away from exploitation. We want policymakers to make policies and laws that are wildlife friendly. And at the end of it all, we want people to be part of this movement that can push for this change. So now zooming in into the narrative change and the people power element or aspect of this strategy. I'm kind of thinking, what role can the media play? Because the media is one of those key partners, key allies, key stakeholders, can swing the message either way. If the media decides to be sensational and move away from telling the right story and tell the other story, of course, that is what, in most cases, the public will go with. Therefore, the media has a big role in terms of changing mindsets, in terms of shifting the way people believe. And I think in this session, as I said, I will not be talking and talking and talking and talking. I will take a break. Oh my God, this is not moving. I will take a break and ask you a question of how can media help in creating this new narrative and protect wildlife. This new narrative, as I said, I can flash it again. It is here. We want wild animals to have the right to wildlife, to become the new narrative. How can you tell the narrative? What role can you play as media? So we will spend, in terms of timing, let me see what we have. We are almost at the top of the hour. So let's take some 5 minutes and I will ask each of you, go into the chat box and just type, how can media, how can in your capacity as a journalist, as a corporate, in the media industry, how can you create this new narrative in order to protect animals? And what are the opportunities that are there? So it is, it's almost 10. Resume talking at 10:05, all 10 or 5 minutes on top of the hour. The question is, how can media help in creating a new narrative and protect wildlife? And the new narrative is the world where wild animals have a right to wildlife. How can we tell that story as the media? Type in the chat.
And how many minutes do we have, Edith?
I said 5 minutes, but I can extend to 10 because I think, yeah, I'll resume presenting at 5 minutes after the hour. It's now 1 past 10 according to my clock.
Yeah, so you can see the question there is how can the media help in creating a new narrative and protecting wildlife? That is the question, and please do type in the chat. I can see, Edith, we already have some chats coming through. Do we read them now or we read them later? You might want to pick a few.
I will read them after the 5 minutes. So for now, we leave them to think and type.
Okay, lovely. So please type in the chat. We have a few coming in. We are waiting for you. Just type in the chat and tell us how can the media help in creating a new narrative and protect wildlife in the long run. Remember, these are some of the conversations that we take forward as wild animal protection and see how we can broadly work with the media to achieve our mandate. So please continue typing. Edith will take the chat up for discussion at 5 minutes past 10.
Keep writing. So our 5 minutes, are over. I'll quickly run through some of the few comments that have come through. One says we can change the narrative by highlighting the dangers of not protecting wildlife. Another one is saying, Bernard says, the media can help by publicizing information on animal welfare, create an understanding of the value of animals in the community. I love the word in the community, but also acknowledging the importance of caring for wild animals to the public. Victor says, by telling positive stories about wildlife, giving comprehensive and positive narrative to the community, especially communities living around near national parks. And Julie says, as media, we can use our platforms to advocate for animal rights, which many people may not know. And the next one, where is the other comments? There are more comments that have come in. Someone says, we, as media, we can tell positive stories and move away from sensational stories and tell the true stories. So those are some of the comments that have come through. Keep writing. Thank you so much. So we will pick them and we'll integrate these comments in, because we are also in the process of developing our plans for the next 3 years in order to start to implement this strategy. So your comments, of course, are very valuable. We'll pick them and integrate them in our planning. So keep writing. So in terms, I could actually recap. In this slide, I've kind of provided some of the tips on how, as media, we can begin really to create a new narrative where we see wild animals as sentient beings, and wild animals as creatures that have a right to exist in their own environment. And we can provide information as media that enables people to redirect, really to start to observe how humans hurt wildlife. And I think that is what one of our colleagues was saying, that we need to begin to write those stories that really are talking about the animals and move away from some of the sensational stories we write about wildlife. I'll give you an example. You will see a story, say, for instance, Miss Tourism will visit Mount Kenya to see what is there. So instead of writing what Miss Tourism did in terms of, say, talking to the communities about how they can keep wildlife, the media will sometimes pick a story like Miss Tourism fell while she was climbing Mount Kenya. And that will, of course, will not certainly tell the story about what took the Miss Tourism in the first instance to Mount Kenya. Instead, to talk about Miss Tourism has fallen as she was coming down Mount Kenya, she was climbing Mount Kenya. So I think those are some of the, it's some sort of an example that I can vividly give. So we need, as media, to start telling those stories that really concern wildlife, so that we can make more people see and learn and appreciate, so that they begin to appeal for the protection of wild animals. They can refuse to consume wild animals. They can stop to demand some of those wildlife experiences that infringe on the health, infringe on the welfare of wild animals. We should be able to tell those stories that will divert people from buying some of those luxury products that are of animal origin, like you've had people wearing fur coats, wearing bangles that are made from ivory, that are consuming meat because it's zebra meat, because if you consume it, then you're seen in a different light, you're in a different class. I think we, as media, we can tell those stories that inspire people to refuse to consume some of those luxury products of animal origin that are needless. But we can also influence decision makers to become more compassionate and make wildlife-friendly policies and regulations and laws. Research has actually indicated that positive feelings towards animals can result in better treatment. This is researched evidence, and as media, we can really play a very, very, very big role. And research has also shown that public policy in conservation can actually be greatly impacted by attitudes and opinion. First of all, look at the people who are sitting in policy making positions. Look at people who are sitting in the tourism boards. Look at people who are sitting at the helm of conservation organizations in our countries. Look at people who are sitting in the NEMAs, National Environment Management Authorities of this world. They come from the same society we come from. So certainly, their attitudes are a reflection of the common attitudes out there in the public. So I think as media, if we are able to tell a story that inspires policymakers, that helps policymakers to change their attitudes, that helps policymakers to change their behaviors, certainly those behaviors, those attitudes will be translated and will be reflected in the policies that they make for our countries, they make for wildlife. So you cannot underestimate the power of storytelling. You cannot underestimate the power of the media in changing not only the attitudes of the common man on the street, but also the attitudes of the policymakers, because ultimately those are people who are going to make decisions for us. I want to end this session and I will read these things, what you see on this screen verbatim. While at the beginning, I highlighted a lot of problems, a lot of challenges that are facing our wildlife. We know it is not lost, because we know some countries are beginning to make shifts in the way they see wildlife, in the way they legislate, or they want to legislate for wild animals. For instance, it's encouraging that in countries like South Africa, they are beginning to make really serious commitments, shift away from exploitative practices, such as captive breeding of lions for bones and for cruel tourism. But it is also, I think, disheartening that countries like Botswana, countries like my own country, Uganda, countries like Kenya, which in the past have had progressive laws that protect wildlife from exploitation, are now moving in the opposite direction. For instance, there are fears that the new legislation in Kenya is going to allow widespread farming of wildlife. Some countries like Botswana, after many years of no hunting, for trophies. They have opened up for trophy hunting. My own country in Uganda, we are beginning to see captive lion breeding coming up, licensing of private people to start to rear big cats. So it is an irony that some of the countries like South Africa, when they are moving towards closing down some of these industries, some African countries are thinking of opening up. And I think, in my view, that is very retrogressive. And those are some of the challenges as media you can help us tackle. Following COVID-19, of course, in Africa, but also in some countries in other parts of the world, they have moved to ban wildlife consumption and export of wildlife products. Some of the countries, such as China, such as Vietnam, and some countries in the European Union are beginning to close some of those markets. And I think that is really progressive, and our African countries should need more relief and begin to move into that direction, because it will be a shame if Africa becomes the next epicenter of a zoonotic disease outbreak, such as COVID-19. Certainly, we commend some of these important steps that have been taken by some of our friends, like South Africa. China has also made some progressive steps. But of course, we call on other African states who are considering legislating and legalizing commercial breeding and farms of wildlife, really not to go into that direction. As partners in this business of animal welfare, we also must change the dominant view, which considers wild animals as mere objects. As I said, wild animals are sentient beings and belong in the wild. And therefore, we must do everything possible in our might and in our capacity to live and thrive in the wild, because that is where they belong. In our new strategy, we really want to make sure that wild animals matter and have the rights to wildlife, free from any form of exploitation, and thrive in abundant natural habitat that is humanely protected, not only for us, but also for the animals and, of course, the global community of people. We must look at wild animals irrespective of their usefulness to us. You can imagine if animals asked us what use we are to them. Sometimes I ponder on this question, that imagine if I was, or if I were an elephant, of what use is a human being? Is a question I keep on pondering on. And I think this is where we need to begin really to look at the way we look at wildlife as human beings. Of what use are we to them? Can these animals exist without us? Or can we exist without them? I think personally, I believe wild animals can actually live without us, but I don't think we can live without them. And because we cannot live without them, that is the whole reason we should actually protect them. Because if the human beings were eradicated from the face of this globe, don't you think the elephant would exist? Don't you think the zebras would exist? Don't you think the rhinos would multiply and fill this world? Don't you think the lions would multiply? Of course, the answer is yes. Therefore, working with people like you, we believe our new wildlife strategy will move the world to demand and ensure that wild animals are valued and they are protected in the wild. Because they can live with, they live without us. but we cannot live without them. I'll end here, and so that the participants can pose questions, they can put across their own views, and please feel free to really make this a very interactive conversation. Although Lucy introduced me as an expert in this field, but I believe there are very many experts out there. There are very many compassionate people out there. There are very many passionate people about these issues out there. Thank you, Lucy, for sharing this session, and thank you, participants, for listening. Over to you, Lucy.
Okay, thank you, Edith. Thank you for the great presentation. I think it was really eye-opening and enlightening. We have about 23 participants on the channel, and it's now time for Q&A. So my request is that if you have any question or suggestion, please raise your hand. I will ask you to unmute and ask the question, or also you can type in the chat on the Q&A. So if you raise your hand, I will unmute you so you can ask the question that you might have. Or even suggestions on how we can improve our reporting, or any experience you've had with wild animal protection since our last training, we can also take that. And now just raise your hand and ask the question. Victor. Victor Muturi, are you in the call? I know we have worked with you for quite some time. We have a hand raised. Yeah. Victor Muturi, you have a question, please unmute and ask the question, and then we'll have Annick here. Over to you, Victor. Okay, I can see you are not able to unmute. So we have Victor and then Ola Olusina. Sorry, it's Olusina. And then Annick here. You can type also in the chat. Evans, I'm not able to see the Q&A. Do you please want to read the Q&A for? Yeah, Victor says, I'm trying to speak, but seems I'm not heard. Evans, could you please check on that, especially on the unmuting the participants? And also you can read for us the question on Q&A. Yes, Clinton Shua says, why is the media like NTV has to remove their program like the NTV World? Why did the NTV World, or why did the NTV remove the program NTV World? Clinton, thank you for that question. but I'm afraid neither Edith nor myself can answer that one. But we believe it was a good program. It was educating people on wildlife conservation, which was good, but we might not have an answer on why it was pulled out. I also know it was a sponsored program, so issues of marketing could have played a part, but just that's my suspicion. So we might not have an answer for that, but thank you for that question.
I think Odusona is ready to take on before we can go to the Q&A.
Okay, Olusuna, please go ahead.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here once again. The presentations have been very, very nice. My concern, just an observation, most of the examples we've been, citing have been from your end, East Africa. But since the last seminar we had about 2 months ago or thereabouts, we've been watching events in South Africa. My country, Nigeria, is notorious in quote about wildlife issues. The recent one we had was about pangolin scales. Pangolin scales, large amount, quantity that was seized. It was seized by the customs right in the center of Lagos. And what the authorities were working on is that the country is now being used as a sort of a storage, because they've been wondering how come that such a large amount of pangolin scales could be mopped up, billions of dollars, millions of dollars worth in the world. What I'm now saying is that, why don't we extend these research activities to include other parts of Africa? I know a lot is happening in West Africa. Togo, Ghana, for example, were cited during the last seminar. But Nigeria has a very big problems. And from what we have seen now, to change the narrative, we should not be really interested in sensational reporting. The authorities have seized a large quantity of pangolin scales. We should go deeper than that. What are the rights of these animals, the pangolins? Of what values do they offer to us? These are the issues. We should go beyond the sensational reporting to working with the authorities to educate them and inform them of the rights of these animals, so that it doesn't just end that we have this large amount of wildlife, blah, blah, blah. It should go beyond that. Now they have seized. We've not had anything from that end again. And I don't think that is good for our campaign. That's my little contribution this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Lucina.
Yeah.
Edith, would you give your response? Then we look at the Q&A on the chat box.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I've also been trying to pick some of the questions from the chat, but of course I'll leave that to Evans to make sure that he picks all of them in case I have missed anything. But I'll straight away go to the question from a colleague from all the way from Nigeria. First of all, thanks for attending and for consistently attending these workshops, Mr. Olusina. Certainly, Nigeria is indeed one of their hotspots for illegal trade. And it's like almost every other day, every other month, you see a story in the media talking about so much I'm trying to reconnect because my internet is gone off. Evans, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, I
on.
can hear you, Edith.
Interestingly, my internet router has gone off, but I can still see I'm active. I don't know how this is now working. This is magical.
That's a miracle. Please
But let me
proceed.
try. Yeah, this is magical. It's interesting. So let me try to see if I can connect via my phone so that. Oh yes, sorry. This is super. It has switched straight away to my phone. Okay. Yeah, so Nigeria indeed is one of those countries that are hotspots, those transit countries when it comes to illegal trade. Up to focusing largely on dealing with leaks on illegal wildlife trade. But of course, when there are issues like that, we also pick them and run with them and condemn them. And right now in our new strategy, we are looking at, we will be tackling both legal and illegal wildlife trade because we believe whether the trade is legal or illegal, it causes enormous suffering to animals. And you'll find a lot of illegality that is being masked by legality. So in a way, I should actually say that we have read. In our new strategy, maybe this is too early to unveil, next 3 years is looking at mapping, expanding our work beyond West Africa, South Africa, and of course also expanding beyond the few West African countries where we are currently working, that is Togo, Benin, Ghana, where we are looking at legal wildlife trade, but also sometimes illegal wildlife trade. So our next focus will be, maybe in 2022, we'll be mapping out additional countries in Africa, which are the hotspots for both legal and illegal wildlife trade, where we see a lot of a lot of animals suffering. And certainly we'll be expanding our work. Nigeria is certainly on our radar, and also champion countries like Gabon, which we know they have been seeing them as some of the interesting countries where we might work as our champions. Because we don't only need to focus on countries that are driving animal suffering. I think we also need to look at countries that are doing good work and work with those help us to be the champions. So I can assure you, Mr. Olusin, that certainly Nigeria is on our radar. And in the next 3 years, perhaps you will see us knocking on your door and really wanting to work to make sure that we deepen this work in that part of the African continent. Evans, do you want to go into the chat and look at each of those questions, or I can answer those that I've just picked? And if I've missed any, maybe you can pick them. But I have a question from, I can't remember. You want to pick them? I think you pick them, then I'll go one by one.
Okay, I'll begin with the Q&A.
Evans,
Yes, I'll begin with the Q&A. I hope you can hear me. Hi, Edith, is my audio audible?
Evans is not responding, so I'll pick the first question from Victor Motur. Okay, fine.
Can you hear me? Hi, Edith. Am I audible?
Yes, Evans, we can hear you. I don't know about the others, but you're quite audible.
Okay. So, Edith, I'll begin with the Q&A, and one of the questions is asked by Duncan Waswa, and he's asking, why is breeding and farming of wildlife dangerous? So maybe you can take on that. Why is breeding and farming of wildlife dangerous?
Evans, you can start.
Yeah, the first question is, why is breeding and farming of wildlife dangerous?
Yeah, thanks. Who asked that question?
That question was asked by Duncan Waswa. Maybe Lucy, as we wait for Edith to come back, you can handle this one by Jeremiah Orondo. And Jeremiah is asking, which plans do you have in terms of engagement with media houses in ensuring continued support and narrative on wildlife protection? Now that most media
That
houses
question,
stories.
Okay. Thank you for that question. It's a good question. On the plans that Wild Animal Protection has in supporting or to support journalists in the media in general, including social media, because I know we have a few who are on the call, is one is to have such trainings, because we believe that these trainings can help us, together forge an alliance that is very much sensitive and aware of wild animal protection's purpose and parameters for success. So this kind of training is one of them. The other is once in a while when we get a proposal, we do support media people. At this point, we are doing it at a very individual level. We might support transport, we might support, budget accommodation for people who are willing to go out and do our story. The other one is we do webinars. Like this year, I know we have done a couple where you get to hear, we launch reports, you get to hear from our campaigns lead, you get to understand what we do. And at the end of those webinars, we have a media session, about 15 minutes, one-on-one. And what we have seen with these one-on-one workshops, we, at the end of the day, get very personal with journalists. And over time, they turn our campaigns managers to the go-to people whenever they need information. And we have done this very well with some of us who are here. Whenever there is a breaking story on animal welfare, people come to us. People have approached Edith, for those in Uganda. People have approached Evans, who is our media lead on this, to have an interview with Victor. So there are all these things that we are trying out, but of course we are open to more suggestions from you. If you feel that there's a way that another institution is doing, or we can do it better, we are also open to that. So three main areas is the small package sponsorship that we give to individual journalists to do stories. Then we have the webinars that we do, we purpose to do every month, and then trainings like this ones, we are hoping that we'll be able to upscale and welfare reporting in Africa. Thank you, Evans.
Thank you, Lucy, for that. I hope, Jeremiah, that question has been sufficiently answered. I'll let you also answer and tackle a question from Ferdinand Mwongela. Ferdinand is asking, what do you see as the gaps in media coverage from your end? Take on that as Edith tries to reconnect. What do you see?
Good question.
Media coverage from your end?
Okay, should I take that one, Edith? Evans?
Yes, please, Lucy, take that.
Okay, sure. Happy to do it. So one of the main challenges that we see or shortcoming with the media, especially in Africa, is that one, we are very much focused on conservation, and it's really not about us. I think it's just the way conservation story has been told in the past. 50 years ago, the dominant narrative has been about conservation and why we should conserve elephant, why we should conserve this, the big fives, which now we understand where the big five came from. So we should also interrogate that further for you guys who are here. So there's a lot of reporting on conservation, which is good, but we forget the other animals are also animals. We call them the big five and the little fives. They're also animals. The pangolins that are being trafficked, they're animals. So our focus mainly is on reporting animal welfare. Is not a big thing. Even when you are reporting conservation, is there an animal welfare issue? Our organization is more concerned about wildlife protection, about animal welfare of each and every animal. So we don't see that coming along. But in the last 2-3 years since we started doing this, I must commend you because you have walked the journey of telling people that it's not just about conserving the wildlife, but also their welfare that matters. And you have also, if you look at issues of trafficking, pangolins, issues of trade, how you covered our Ethiopian airline, reporting the report that we launched recently, how you covered the big five, small five report, how you covered our, parrots that are used as exotic pets. You covered it so well. So that is the thing that we want. We want to have a bigger scope on how we are reporting with animal welfare at the center, because all these things are good, but if we tag along animal welfare and put it at the center, then you have a bigger view in terms of telling the story of not just the big five, but all animals, all inclusive. And once you do that, we believe that then we'll be creating that movement that we want to have. People who are advocating, people who are at the front line, people who are telling the world, hey, we need to protect all animals. We do not want to sell animals, because if you sell animals, you can get corona like this, or you can get this thing. So we want to tell the wholesome story of animal welfare. And if we do that, then we'll be, protecting animals in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, for that comprehensive response. Edith, are you now ready?
Yes,
Edith,
yes, I am.
Okay, I'm going to
Can you recap which question I was supposed to respond to, where we ended?
Yes, it was a question from Duncan Waswa, and I'm going to combine it with a question from Miriam Murigi because they are somehow correlated. So Duncan is asking, why is breeding and farming of wildlife dangerous? And Miriam is asking, and is wildlife breeding and farming legal in Kenya? So the first part of the question is, why is breeding and farming of wildlife dangerous?
Yeah, I'll begin with the first part. Of course, farming wildlife or breeding wildlife in captivity means you're basically taking wild animals from the wild, which is their natural habitat, and you're bringing them closer to people. You're putting them in some sort of an artificial environment, which is not their ideal environment. So when you take animals from their natural environment and you keep them in places which are not their natural environment, of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, you end up kind of depressing the 5 domains of animal welfare that I mentioned. Look at an elephant. An elephant in the wild will roam many kilometers in a day. A parrot in a day will fly thousands of kilometers to forage, find mates, and to interact with species of its kind. So of course, when you farm animals in a kind of constrained environment, then you compromise all those 5 freedoms that I talked about, the 5 domains that constitute animal welfare that I talked about. So when those are compromised, especially in totality, if all those conditions are compromised, then you end up depressing, in most cases, the welfare of the animals. And that translates into sometimes bad health. It depresses their immunity to different, and then they become vulnerable to different diseases. So when that happens, the chances are high that diseases will break out in those conditions where animals are being bred or they're being kept in environments that are not their natural habitats. So when diseases break out, there's a high likelihood that disease A or a pathogen that causes disease A can jump from one species to another, especially in conditions where you are keeping these animals together. And these germs can actually, or viruses can actually mutate, or they can even change. And when they change, they can even find a way of getting into humans' environment. They can get into the human's body. You can come into contact with those germs or viruses or bacteria. And then you end up actually contracting diseases, which ideally should have been diseases for animals, but now they have jumped onto human beings. So keeping animals in the wild can actually be dangerous, not only to the animals themselves, but also can be dangerous to human beings. A good example is, of course, the COVID-19 we are currently living with, which is believed to have originated from a food market in China. That is one example. But in the past, there have also been many examples, many diseases like Ebola, HIV, AIDS. All these have come from our interaction with being in close proximity with animals. How? Because we are farming these animals, we are exploiting them for different purposes, and in interacting with them, the chances are high that we will contract those diseases. Last year, we carried out a research in South Africa, and we are looking at the different diseases associated with the lions that are kept in captivity, but also lions in the wild. And we came up with a list of almost over 60 diseases or pathogens that can actually have the potential of inflicting on human beings. So you can see the danger of bringing those wild animals close to us and also destroying their habitats and breaking that barrier, which all safeguards us from those potential diseases. So in a nutshell, it is dangerous, first of all, to the animals themselves, but is also dangerous for public health purposes when we keep wild animals in close proximity with us, in a way of farming, in a way of breeding, in a way of even keeping them as pets in our homes. I hope that answers your question. Of course, there's a lot of literature about diseases associated with wildlife farming. The second question, which is tied to this, can you remind me
Is wildlife feeding and farming legal in Kenya?
Yes, wildlife farming is legal in Kenya. You must have seen many wildlife farms scattered around Kenya. Certainly in many, you can also even talk of conservancies as wildlife farming. I think we are moving, towards now another phase where really we want to see these wild animals where Kenya is going to see these wild animals as farm animals. And I think that is not correct. And many advocates have been really trying to engage with government to make sure that we do not go that direction. We do not go the direction of South Africa, where almost now all the wildlife is just existing in artificial farms. That is my plea, and this is the plea of wild animal protection, that we shouldn't be seeing Kenya moving into that direction.
Thank you, Edith. I'm now going to pose to you a question from Naftali Muigai. Naftali is asking, hi Edith, what message do you have for the ongoing Global Biodiversity Summit in Kunming, China, and what the summit means for wildlife protection in Africa? Naftali is from Xenia News Agency here in Nairobi, Kenya.
Yeah. I think
he's asking about, yeah, please take it if you got the question.
Yeah, for me, the Beyond 2020 Biodiversity Framework, which is, I think, now being debated and is really the focus, is really disappointing in that wildlife trade is being entrenched in the new framework. And I think this is where we need to collectively work together to make sure that we do not go and do that. Of course, this has been a very long negotiation process, but it's unfortunate that wildlife trade, even amid this COVID-19, is being entrenched in a global framework like this. And that is the reason I was saying we need to educate our policymakers, because many of our policymakers from Kenya, from Ghana, from South Africa, from Uganda, from Kenya, from Nigeria, and elsewhere, they are participating in these processes. And we know they are all in support of entrenching wildlife trade in the new biodiversity framework for the next 10, I think up to 2030. And I think this is where the media can play a role. In my view, this is a raw deal. What is happening right now is a raw deal for the African wildlife. And as I mentioned when I presented our framework and our strategy for the next 10 years, in our third intervention, which is creating a new deal for wildlife, the conventional biodiversity, the conventional biological diversity is one of those, I think, global mechanisms we need to tackle, we need to target, to make sure that some of those retrogressive provisions within the framework do not even get entrenched, do not live to see maybe their second, fourth, and fifth birthday. We know the negotiations are quite advanced, but I believe with the media, if we continue to if we continue to drum and raise the profile of these issues, we think at some point they will listen. That is my view. The summary is that for me, it is a raw deal for Africa's wildlife.
Thank you, Edith. And lastly is a question from Victor Motori, so that we close this session. Victor is asking, are there frameworks in place set by the Kenyan Parliament dealing with animal protection? Are there frameworks in place set by the Kenya Parliament dealing with animal protection?
Yeah, of course, yes. As I said, currently, actually from last year, the Kenyan government has been in the process of reviewing the current Wildlife Act. And of course, this is something that goes through the parliament, and in it, certainly, much as we are criticizing entrenchment of wildlife farming, it has very many other good elements in it. And certainly this goes through parliament, and then finally it is confirmed and enacted as signed off into law. There is also in the last, I don't know if Victor Yamo is on this platform. I think he's not, but I know he's very well versed with the new animal welfare law in Kenya, which was revised, I think, last year. And right now, Kenya has one of the most progressive animal cruelty law on the African continent. I'm sure we can share it with the media after this, Evans. Right now, I don't have a copy of that the new law, but I think it's something that we can share with the media after this. It's one of the most progressive, I think, animal protection law on the African continent.
All right. Thank you, Edith. So there are no further questions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to project a screen just in case anybody has questions, either directed to Edith or any one of us from World Animal Protection. You can write to me or call me. You can as well also, we can also set up media interviews. As that screen will be projecting, Lucy will come back and finalize the session. So please confirm if you are able to see my screen.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, so you can take a screenshot of it just in case you have any inquiries or you'd like to be set up for an interview, you can always reach out to me. Thank you very much for that question and answer session. Back to you, Lucy.
Is Lucy online? Looks like she's
Oops, she dropped.
yeah, maybe you could try to close.
Yes, so what I'm going to request from the participants, if we were in a physical meeting, of course, we would have ended with a group photo. So what I'm going to request is, if it is possible from your end to turn on your video, please turn on your video so that we can take a screenshot of it, which will act as a virtual group photo.
Can you remove your screen? Stop sharing so that we can see everyone.
Okay. So please turn on your videos so that we can take a group photo, a virtual one.
Very interesting.
Unfortunately, when setting up the video call, participants' bit was their video is turned off.
You can't turn it on right now. Lucy is back.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I was offline.
But I can see Victor, so meaning other participants can also be seen. Oh, you mean the video was turned on? Off.
Yeah, the video was turned off at the background.
Can you see me?
No, I can't see you. Sorry.
There's no video icon on my end.
Oh. Sorry about that. So what do we do, Evans, in that regard?
I think for now we'll just have to close it. Let Lucy give her closing remarks.
Someone is saying would like an interview with me.
Oh yes, Duncan, I'll reach out to you later and then we can organize for that.
Sure, and if anyone wants an interview with Edith on an area of discussion today, or with wild animal protection in general, any area that you think you can pursue, you need to talk to Evans, and I'm sure Evans, they do have your email address. That is evanskipkorio@wildanimalprotection.org. Evans, you will share that in an email after this, plus your telephone number, so it's easy to get. I'm sure you'll do that, Evans?
Yes,
Oh,
the way we did project,
the videos are coming.
Okay.
I can see the videos.
Actually, what I'm doing is I'm promoting each member to be a panelist so that they are able to share their videos.
So basically, for those who can put on their video, please do put on their video. But we also recognize some might not be in a position to do that. So.
Yeah. Oh, I see some other participants in the background with Victor.
Hi, Victor. You want to take a group photo, you know. Victor, happy to see you.
It's okay to have the other participants also in the meeting.
It's long time. It's a long time. Almost
long time. Yeah.
Almost 2 years. This corona is not good with that.
Yeah, well, let's hope it goes by the end of the year.
There is Abigail.
So what I'm doing, I'm promoting each one of them to be a panelist, at least for those who will be able to turn on their videos, then we can take the virtual group photo together. In the meantime, Lucy, you can be sharing your closing remarks.
Oh, I was still glued at seeing the people. Yeah, but really, was great hosting you in this training. We look forward to having many more by the end of the year, because as Wild Animal Protection, we believe that the media, journalists, and social media really are part of the journey, part of the people we say we move the world to protect animals. The we refers to you and I. So the we is the world, and we are part of the world. And since the media is an agenda setter, you're one of the people that we look forward to really closely partner so that you can form this movement. And just know that you are a champion when you go out there, when you write, talk about the work that Wild Animal Protection is doing for animals, and let's walk this journey together. So I appreciate you for coming, and I look forward to reading much more about Wild Animal Protection in your paper or in your story or in your Facebook post. Thank you very much, and God bless. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lucy. So we can all smile on the screen and I can take a snap.
But not everybody is there, I think, because we are 21 and I see a few faces.
Yes, I've been trying to promote each and every individual, but it seems it is taking a little bit long. And so we can work with the number that we have currently. All right, thank you, everyone. And bye.
Should we pause? Should we smile?
Now we should look serious.
Right, I think we are good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you very much, and join us next time here. If you have any questions, Evans Kiporio, please, Evans, type your email address and phone number so we can be able to reach you. Otherwise, it's bye-bye for now.
All right.
Bye-bye.